Well, hello, good morning. Welcome to Coffee with Connie. I'm Connie Fuchsa, and I am coming to you to many days a week to try to tell you all kinds of information about buying and selling real estate, your home closing, the mortgage process. I have been in the title home closing process business for more than 30 years. And so I have lots of different people ask me lots of different questions about the process. And so what I try to do is come to you a couple times a week and talk to you about what that process looks like and some things that we get questions about all the time. So earlier this week, I talked about how do you know how much money you need for closing. And so we talked about a lot about that, how the lender helps you come up with what that number looks like and their part in the process. We had a lender that actually logged on and was answering some of the questions and giving you some information. And today I wanted to talk about, all right, now that you know how much to bring to closing, how do you bring that to closing? What does that look like? And what else do you need for closing? And let's talk about the seller side. We very rarely talk about things with respect to the selling of your home because that part of the process is a little less paperwork intensive than the buying side. And so there's a lot less questions that need to be asked, and the seller's processes usually happen before they even actually go into contract. But today I did want to talk about both sides of it because sometimes there's some pieces of the puzzle that the seller needs to bring to closing that you may not necessarily know. So first of all, let me talk about the money you need for closing if you're buying. So if you're bringing money to the closing, there was a time when there was several different ways that money could come to the title company for your closing to settle everything out. There was a couple of different ways. You could get a bank check, which was a check that the bank actually created. They withdrew the money out of your account, created a check, gave it to you. It was addressed to the title company or to yourself, and then you would sign it over at the table. Then there was also a process where you could do certified funds, which is where the bank takes your check and stamps it and guarantees that money is in your account. And they actually set it aside so you can't draw on it. And so it told the title company that money was good. Now, the most common way now is to wire funds to the title company. And the reason for that is because, unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there trying to figure out different ways how to get your money into their pocket. And with the certified and the cashier's checks, what was happening was the bad guys, if you will, would steal check stock or reproduce checks that looked really real, like the bank check that you would bring to your closing. And so those people would come to closing and present a check that the check was really no good. And title companies cannot settle the transaction unless all the funds are there at closing. And the reason is because they have to settle all of those funds with all the different parties. So they need the money from the bank, they need the money from the buyer, and then what happens is all that money is dispersed to all the different people that are supposed to get paid at that closing. And if the title company doesn't have good funds, doesn't have all that money, they can't disseminate all of those funds at closing. Hence, the closing isn't complete. And so most title companies and most sellers will not do what's called a dry closing, which means they don't have actual cash. And because a lot of times it happened that there was a lot of fraudulent bank checks that were being presented at closing, title company said, forget it, we're not taking checks anymore, we want wires. Well, now it's a little funny because, again, the bad guys have stepped up their game and they figured out how to intercept email notifications about information about wires, and they're trying to get you to wire your funds somewhere else. And so they can take your money and then you don't have any money for closing. So a lot of title companies have gone to different levels, encrypting email, mailing you wiring instructions, all of those different pieces. But most of them will not take checks anymore because of the fraudulent check situation. So what they recommend is that you wire the funds directly into their account. And then if there's a difference, you can either write a personal check for whatever that difference is. And every title company has a different threshold of what that number looks like. If you bring too much money to the table, then you'll get a check back from the title company at the closing for whatever that difference was. So that's how those funds are settled up. And the same is true on a seller side. You know, we're talking about the buyers because most often they have to bring funds to the table, but sometimes the seller has to bring money to the closing as well. And these same principles apply. So in that case, the title company would try to help you come up with a very good estimate of what that's going to look like. Of course, we don't know exactly what those numbers are going to be until we get all the closing paperwork from the buyer's mortgage company and from the rest of the pieces that we pull together, the certifications, the bills that come in, your payoff, those kinds of things, to make sure we know exactly what that bottom line is going to be. But with the seller side, typically we know a little bit in advance, and so we can give you a number and you can wire those funds directly in for closing. But we need those funds on the day of closing in order for the settlement closing transaction to be completed. The other thing that you might want to know is there may be some pieces that need to come to closing that don't have anything to do with the funds. If you're selling your house and let's say you and your spouse own the property together and your spouse has passed, the title company may require a copy of that death certificate at closing so that they can confirm that that person no longer has an ownership interest. Maybe the person, you own the property with another person and that person can't be at closing. Then maybe you have a power of attorney. They are probably going to want to see that power of attorney in advance, but need the original at closing because that power of attorney is going to have to be recorded in the land records with that document that's transferring ownership. They may need a final release if you're selling your property and let's say you had a home equity line and you paid it off forever ago and you got the paperwork, but it was never recorded in the land records. They may need those original documentation. And a lot of this stuff they're probably going to ask you for in advance, but you may need to bring the original to closing. If you always are going to need a government issued picture ID at closing. So not your BJ's card, not your gym membership card that has your picture and your information on it. You're going to need a government issue picture ID, which is in some cases, some people bring their military ID, your driver's license, your ID card from the Motor Vehicles Administration. A government issued picture ID is a necessity. Otherwise, the closing cannot be completed or the funds can't be dispersed. Maybe someone can't be at closing and they're asking for their funds to be transferred in certain areas, so we'll need that documentation. So anything you've been working on with the title company before closing, they may need the originals at closing, so be prepared to bring that paperwork to closing. If you're buying and your homeowner's insurance policy, your lender may require a copy of it before closing and may require you bring that original bill or paid receipt to closing. So those kind of things that they're asking you about, usually you're going to send them by email in advance and the originals need to be at the closing. So if they're asking you for these kind of things, that's one of the questions. Do I need to bring the originals to closing? And if you're not sure, do it. And then you can be sure that you've got everything that you need. So hopefully I gave you a little bit of information. The money is the big question that we get all of the time. Wiring the funds are going to be the way that most title companies are going to require. Bring a check to make sure that in case there's a shortage, you have the difference. If you're selling, bring a check. If you want to have the money wired to you, we can use you can void the check right at the table, and we can use the numbers on that check to be able to send the wire into your account. So hopefully that helped you understand a little bit about what kinds of things might be needed at closing. If you have more questions, please reach out to me and let me know what those questions are, because if you have that question, I'm sure someone else does as well. Hey there, good morning, Angela. Thanks so much for tuning in. She's always a loyal listener, and I appreciate that very much. If you guys run through questions, let me know. If somebody you know is buying or selling a house and they have a question, let me know. Let them reach out to me. There's no commitment. There's no anything. I am just absolutely passionate about giving you information and want you to understand the process. It's truly my passion that you understand the process better and that you understand exactly what the purpose and the value of a title company is. So hopefully you guys got some good information today. Please, please, please hit that share button. I'd really appreciate that. It helps people you know get the same information we're talking about. Not to mention, the more shares that you get, we're giving away this really cool coffee mug every month to the person who hits that share button the most. So it's a 20-ounce Coffee with Connie mug, so you can share Coffee with Connie with me on Tuesdays and Thursday morning while you drink your coffee. And all you have to do is hit that share button. So I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Thanks so much for tuning in to Coffee with Connie. I'm Connie Fuchsa, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon. Take care, guys, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.